This is a guide for the premium plugin Heroes. In this guide I'll cover installation, basic configuration, and basic commands. And in this guide I'll be assuming that you know how to set up a Minecraft server running either Spigot or Paper Spigot, and that you know how to install plugins. So the very first thing we're going to start off with is downloading the plugin. I'll have all the download pages for the plugin and the dependencies linked in the description, but you're just going to click on the download now button on the Spigot page. If you do need an older version, if your server is running an older version of Minecraft, you can click on version history and download the older versions here. You just want to match the date, whatever date your Minecraft server is from. The first dependency we're going to download is Vault. Heroes won't run without Vault. You need this in your server for it to work. The second one is EffectLib. This is an optional dependency. It is required for skill effects, so if you have hearts or sparkles coming out of any of your skills, I'm going to download it just in case. And the Heroes plugin, this version here, does come with the default skills in the pack here, but if you do need to download them, they are down here. Some versions don't come with them in the pack, some do, and there are premium skills you can download as well. You need to pay extra for those. So now that we have all of our files downloaded, I'm just going to run them onto my desktop here, and we're going to unpack the Heroes folder. Okay, now we're going to open up our server folder, and we're going to drop the Heroes jar and the Heroes configuration files into our plugins folder. And then I'm going to run the two dependencies, Vault and EffectLib. Will not run, I'm going to push them into the plugins file here. And those are set up, so we're going to run our server now, just to get all the files configured. Alright, so now that the server is starting here, we're just going to open up Minecraft to make sure that everything loaded properly. An easy way to do this is just type /plugins, and all is green, so everything should be good in theory. So we're just going to get out of Minecraft here, and we're going to close the server. Another good practice is to check your logs. Make sure that the server didn't spit out any errors while starting up. So as you can see here, everything is good. You'll see some info and warnings on Heroes. These are basically just Heroes spitting out things saying it doesn't like the way a specific file is configured, but there's actually no issues with the file itself, so everything is good. So we're going to hop into plugins here, in the Heroes folder, and then we're going to start with the classes subfolder. So these are going to be your default classes. Citizen is going to be the first default class. What we're going to do is set that to false for the sake of this tutorial. And then we're going to open up Rogue. So now that we've set Citizen to not be the default class, we're just going to set Rogue to be the default class. So now when a player joins a server, this is going to be the first class that they're going to be. The name is just whatever you want the class to be named. So let's say you want the class to be named something crazy like Wild. Now the class will be named Wild in-game, even though the file is Rogue. I'm just going to set that back to Rogue for the sake of the tutorial. Parents, these are the class dependencies for when you're specializing into a class. We're not going to worry about this since Rogue is a primary class. Primary is whether or not Rogue is a basically class. Secondary would be a profession. And then your tertiary would be a race, but that is a separate option. They'll be in a separate file. Description is just whatever the class description will be when people type /hero paths and they want more info on a class. Run command is going to be the command that the server runs whenever a player chooses a class. So in this case, it's going to give the person diamonds, and it's going to give them a mythic mob item if you have mythic mobs installed. If you want to add a command, it's just as simple as adding an option like this, and then let's say we want to message the player. So we'll have it message player name, and then you picked a good class. So now whenever they choose Rogue, it's going to message them saying that they picked a good class. They'll receive a message from the console. Stamina is basically like your hunger. It's the cost for doing specific actions like jumping, taking damage, sprinting, and whatnot. So these you normally just want to leave at their defaults. You only adjust them in class specific cases. Attributes are also very class specific. So strength is how much damage they do, endurance and dexterity would be mobility. So Rogue is more like a glass cannon, so it's going to do a moderate amount of damage, but it's going to be able to move around a lot. Not necessarily like a glass cannon, actually more like just a high mobility, low damage class. And then you're going to notice it'll have lower wisdom and intellect than something like a mage, because it doesn't need as much because its skills don't use those. Permitted armor is just going to be the type of armor sets you can use. You can set specific things like leather_helmet. Now they can't wear the full leather set, they can only wear the helmet. If you just have it as leather, they can wear the full leather set. Let's say you want to permit them access to a chain breastplate. You would just put chain, minus this H there, chain_breastplate. And now they can wear the chain breastplate. but none of the other armors from the chain set. Permitted weapons are the exact same thing as permitted armors, just with tools. So if it just says wood and stone here, it means they have access to the full tool set: pickaxe, axe, hoe, shovel, etc. If it just has specific tools here, that means they won't have access to the full iron tool set, just the iron tools listed here. Same thing with gold and diamond. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to remove gold. So now rogue can't use any gold items, and I'm going to give them full access to iron and only access to a diamond sword. The class also has access to a bow, which has to be permitted, and then you can even get crazy with items like a blaze rod. So now the class needs specific permissions to be able to use a blaze rod, and this one has it. Item damage is just how much damage they do with each item. So in this case, an iron sword will deal 6 damage, diamond sword will deal 8, and if you want to do something crazy like add a blaze rod, you just do blaze rod, and then you can set the damage to something crazy like 100, and now blaze rod is a god weapon. Item damage per level is how much the items increase in their damage every time you level up. So let's say the player's at level 1, they'll deal 8 damage with a diamond sword. Let's say they reach level 3, they'll add 0.2 multiplied by 3, so they'll deal an extra, actually in this case it would be plus 2 because 1 is the default. They would deal an extra 0.4 damage. So at level 3 they would deal 8.4 damage, level 4 they'll deal 8.6 damage. It goes up by 0.2 per level. Projectile damage is the same thing as item damage, just with projectiles like arrows, and projectile damage level is the same thing as item damage level, just to arrows. Permitted skills is where you're getting into the meat of the plugin. So this is where you give access to all of the skills that you have in your skills folder here. The easiest way to find new skills is to go into the skills YML, and let's say we want to add a skill like ice arrow to rogue. We're just going to copy all the attributes here, and we're just going to paste it in here, and then we have to tab everything appropriately. So now rogue has access to ice arrow. You're going to see things here like use text. This is just going to be the text it uses for the rogue class specifically. If you want to change it, you can change it to something like rogue used ice arrow, and now it'll only say this for the rogue class, whereas if you edit it in the skills.yml, this is what any other class with the skill will have on there unless you change it for that specific class. For this case, I'm just going to remove all the use text because it's just unnecessary text inside of the YML file here. Let's say you want them to gain the skill at a specific level. We can set it to level 25, so now they gain the skill halfway through their leveling. Duration is how long the skill is going to last on their bow, and then speed multiplier is how much it reduces the player's speed by, so 2 would be half speed. You're going to notice other things on the skills here. Every skill is going to have their own specific set of instructions you can give it. So in Smoke's case, you have duration and cooldown. Cooldown is going to be one of the most common ones, so this is how long it takes to use a skill after using it. So let's say we want to add a cooldown to ice arrow. We're just going to throw cooldown in here. And it runs in ticks, not in seconds. So if I put 3,000, the cooldown is 3 seconds. If I put 30,000, it's 30 seconds. You basically want to add 3 zeros to whatever the duration is, and the duration will always be in seconds. If I want it to be 5 minutes, it would be 300,000. But in this case, we just want it at 30,000, so it takes a moderate amount of time to recharge. Moving down to experience sources. This is just the sources that the class can get experience from, as the name implies. So killing would be mobs, PvP would be players, and then if you want them to gain experience from crafting items, you would put crafting under the experience sources. If you want to know every experience source, you can reference them on the hero's wiki. And let's say you want to remove experience source, you just remove it from here, so now they'll only gain experience from killing mobs, but not other players. EXP modifier is the amount that it adjusts the base EXP that a specific action gives. So let's say you kill a creeper and it gives you 40 experience. If you're at 1.0, you'll gain 40. If you're at 2.0, it'll double it, so you'll gain 80 experience for killing the creeper. And if you're at 0.5, it'll now gain 20 experience for killing the creeper. It's 0.2, 0.5 is what we want. So this is really good for any specializations on classes, because you want them to gain less experience in your primary classes, so they take longer to level up. But in this case, I'll just leave it at 1.0, so that way the class levels up at the default rate. Base max health is how much health the class starts off with, and max health per level is how much health it'll gain every time it levels up. So at level 2 it would be 28.4, and by the time you get to level 10 it'll have an extra whatever 4 multiplied by 9 is added on top of this. Same thing with base max mana, how much mana the class starts off with. Mana per level is how much it gains every time it levels up. EXP loss is how much EXP you lose every time you die. Wildcard permissions is if you have the hero's class permission given to a player, will they be able to use this class? If you have it set to true, all people with the permission will be able to use it. If you have it set to false, only admins will be able to use the class, or players given specific permissions for this class. Because it's a default class, we want this set to true. And tier 1 is whether or not the class will show up in the hero paths list. Normally you want to set specs to tier 2, you want to leave primary classes as tier 1, and recipes are any crafting recipes that the class has access to, which you can find in the recipes.yml. Alright, so now we're going to work on making a specialization for a class. So we're just going to go back into the heroes folder and back into classes, and because we were working on rogue earlier, we're just going to make a copy of rogue and turn this into the specialization. Let's say we want to name it assassin. You can name the file whatever you want, but I'm just going to name it assassin to make it easier. And then when you're in the file, you just want to change the name to assassin. So now this is a spec for rogue, so you have two options for turning it into a spec. First, we want to set default to false, so they won't be this class when they join, but you use the parents here for that. So strong is a class that you have to master to be able to use this class, and weak is a class that you do not have to master, but you can master multiple in the weak list. So let's say I add mage to the list, and warrior. Now if you either master mage or warrior, you'll have access to assassin, but you don't have to master both of them, just one of the two. Let's set that back to default and make the strong here be rogue, since that was the intended purpose. So now when I add rogue to the list here, the player will have to master rogue to get access to the assassin class. No questions about it. You can add multiple strongs like rogue and mage, meaning they have to master rogue and mage to get access to assassin. The other thing you want to edit on a spec is the tier. So we're just going to set this to tier 2, so it doesn't show up in the hero paths list, only when they type in hero specs and then the name of the class. So in this case it'd be rogue, and it'll spit out assassin. You also want to change the description, so that way it'll be tier 2 rogue spec to make it easier, so that way when they look it up, it'll just show up as a tier 2 rogue spec. You can edit anything here, just like a default class. Generally, you want to make your specs stronger than your default classes because you have to master your class to be able to go into a spec. So if we just go down to health, let's say we set the health to 50.0 and health regeneration per level to 1.0. Now the health will be a lot higher than rogue, and he'll gain more health as he levels up. And let's say you want to add more skills. It's the same as adding a normal skill to a normal class. You just go into your skills.yml file, you steal a skill, and you throw it in here. And then you would just tab appropriately, and then edit all the attributes like you had done before. And if you want to remove a skill, this won't affect the rogue class, only the assassin class. Let's say we want to remove mark and recall. We'll just remove them from the list here. And now while rogue had access to them, assassin does not, but it does have access to decay. So you can gain skills, remove skills, and make classes that are a bit more specific in their use cases than the primaries. So now we're going to create our professions. We're just going to hop back into the heroes folder and go into classes. The default profession is going to be crafter. So let me just enter crafter here. And the difference you're going to find between a profession and a class is that it's going to be, first you're going to want a default profession, and it's also going to be listed as secondary instead of primary. So this way when a player types /hero prof and then the name of a profession, they'll pick the profession rather than a class. You can adjust a profession just like a class. You can give it its own individual skills and whatnot. If they do any higher damage, it's going to override and choose whichever one is higher priority. So in most cases that'll be the class. And then you can just adjust the commands and whatnot. It's just like editing a class, but you're creating a profession. So you want to focus it more on doing something like a job, like a doctor, or in this case a crafter, rather than something like a combat class, like rogue or mage. Alright, now we're going to set up our race. So we're just going to go back into the heroes folder, back into classes, and you're going to notice by default you'll have elf and orc. So these are the two default races. Let's just edit elf because it's the default one. The differences you're going to find between races and classes is that a race will be set as race true, and then you're going to set it as primary false and secondary false. So this isn't a profession, it's not a class, it's a race. You can give a race attributes, you can give it all the same things a class has, you can even give a race specializations, but for most service cases you just want to keep it simple. You just want to give it a low amount of levels, if any levels at all, and then add the specific skills you want this race to have access to. Let's say you want elf to have access to mark, but you want orc to have access to something different. You can then add a skill to here, such as, let's say, this won't make sense for orc, but like ender pearls. So now the orc class, or the orc race, my apologies, can use ender pearls, whereas the elf race cannot. It's easy as that. The next thing I'm going to show you are global skill sets. So what global skill sets allow you to do is create a file where you can put a bunch of skills in it that every player, regardless of their class, will have access to. So to create one of these, you're going to go into your heroes folder and your classes folder, and you're just going to want to create a new file. I'm going to name mine global skill sets, since that's what the option is called, or global skill set.yml, since you want it to be a YAML file, and you're just going to edit it with your preferred program. Now you're going to want your options to be exactly what I have here. The name can be whatever you want it to be. Mine is global skill set just to make it easier, but you need global skill set to be true, default as false so it doesn't show up in the hero paths list, primary as false so that way it doesn't show up in the professions list, and tier 0 so you can't find it through any other means of going through the heroes menus. And I'm just going to save this file as a YAML file, even though it has the extension on the end there. We just need to set it specifically in the program here. So now we have all the YAML tabbing options. And now to add skills, you just add them like you normally would. So in this case, I'm going to add recall at level 1 and mark at level 1 as well. Now if you want to add skills to this, it's just like any other class, and if you need to find skills, just like any other class, you can reference your skills.yml. So in this case, I want to add the skill Ender Pearls to the default class, so that way every class has access to Ender Pearls. All you have to do is paste it in here, tab appropriately, and get rid of all the text that you don't need. So now every class will have access to Ender Pearls. You don't need to specify the level, it should grant it at level 1, but I'm going to do it just in case. So now every single class will have access to recall, mark, and Ender Pearls at level 1. The next thing we're going to work on are the configuration files. So to get to those, you're just going to go back into the heroes folder, and we're going to start with the config.yml. Now there's a lot of options in here, and I'm not going to touch on every single one. If you want to know what some options that I don't cover do, you can always go over to the heroes spigot page, scroll on down to Wiki, and go over to configuration. This has a list for almost every single option in the configuration file, and it'll tell you what they do. It's fairly accurate. Some items are a little bit off. If you do have any questions about any specific items here, feel free to leave a comment on the video, and I'll be able to help you out. The main ones I'm going to touch on are starting with EXP curve. So the EXP curve is the adjustment of how much EXP it takes to level up at each level. So at level 1, if you're at 1.0, it'll take less experience to level up than level 50. If you set it to 2.0, that extreme gets pushed further. Let's say level 1 took 50 experience, it'll now take 25, but let's say 50 took 5,000, it'll now take 10,000. And then if you set it lower, it'll just be the opposite of that. Maximum EXP is how much EXP it takes to master a class, and max level is the level you'll reach once you have the maximum number of EXP. So in this case, when you get 100,000 experience, you'll reach level 50. Experience loss for both of these is just how much in percentage of experience for your current level that you lose every time you die. Max party size is the maximum number of people you're allowed in your party. Party EXP bonus is how much EXP you gain while in a party in percentage. So 1.0 means you gain a normal amount of EXP, while 0.8 means every player will gain 80% experience in their party. So let's say I set it to 1.0 now. Every time a person in a 2-person party kills a mob, they'll both gain the normal amount of experience. Level loss and mastery loss are just whether or not you lose levels when you die, and whether or not you lose your mastery if you were to die. Spawner checks just covers whether or not if there's a spawner in the area. If it's false, it won't care if there's a spawner in the area and you won't lose experience from it. If it's untrue, it'll adjust the experience based off your experience multiplier here. PvP range is the range of levels that players are allowed to PvP from. So let's say you have somebody who's level 1 and somebody who's level 50. They'll be able to PvP, and let's say hypothetically your max level is 60 and it's set to 50. If somebody's level 60 and somebody's level 9, they won't be able to PvP. Minimum PvP level is the lowest level you're allowed to PvP at. So let's say somebody's level 1, they'll be able to PvP. Say we set it to 6. If they're level 1 through 5, they won't be able to PvP, but once they reach level 6, they will be able to PvP. Gonna go down to classes here. All of these swap costs are the costs with your currency plugin on how much it costs to change your class. Swap cost is the default cost to switch to a class you've never been to. Old swap cost is the amount it costs to switch to a class that you have been before, and you're just switching back to. This is the same thing, just covering professions and old professions, race, and old races. Master swap cost free just means that if you were to switch to a class you've already reached level 50 on, or whatever your mastery level is, if it'll be free. If you have it set to true, it won't cost anything. If you have it set to false, it'll use your old swap cost for that. First swap free is whether or not the first time a player switches their class, if it's free or if it'll charge them money. And then this will just be the same option but for race. Reset EXP on change will set it so whether or not a player will lose the EXP for a class when they change to a different class. So let's say they're a level 25 warrior and they want to change to mage. When they switch to mage, if it's on true, that means they're going to lose all their experience for the warrior class that they were before. And reset master on change is the same thing, just for mastery. So let's say somebody's a level 50 warrior and they change to mage. If it's on false, that means they'll keep their mastery for warrior and they switch back, they'll be level 50 still. If it's on if it's on true, that means when they switch back to warrior, they'll be back to level 1. This is the same thing, but just for professions. Moving down to attributes here. This just changes how the attributes change as players level up. So right now it's set so that way they get 3 attribute points per level. Every time they increase their strength, they're going to gain 1 extra attack damage. They're going to gain this much health per constitution, etc., etc. for each option here. Health bar will change the settings for the hearts that you have right above your hotbar. Limit 1 bar means that you'll only have the default 10 hearts that show up, and health per bar is 20. So let's say you set this to false, and you set the health per bar to 40. That means if a class has 80 health, you'll now have 2 bars of health, because each bar takes up 40 health, and the class has 80 health, so 2 bars. Moving on down to properties. Storage type is by default YML. You can change this to SQL if you're using a MySQL database. Economy is just whether or not you're using an economy plugin. Slow while casting is just whether or not the player stops sprinting whenever they cast a spell. Combat time is the duration of combat when a player attacks a mob. Global cooldown is the cooldown between each skill use. So let's say a player uses Fireball and then Ice Bolt. Even though they both have their own separate cooldowns, there'll be a half a second cooldown between using each skill. Combat enter message is the message that'll enter in chat once you hit a mob or player. An exit message is the same thing, just once the combat timer has finished. Stamina. This is just going to control your default stamina amounts if the class doesn't have it in there. So the cost you'll take to do each of these actions here. The food option here controls whether or not you're using Minecraft's default food option or Hero's food option. The adjustments here just allow you to change how much food heals you. So in this case it's going to heal 5%, and it's going to take 5 seconds per health. So let's say you set this to 1 or 1000. That means the player is going to regenerate 5% of their health every 1 second after eating food. So by default, we just want to leave that at 5,000. Bonus is whether or not you want there to be an EXP bonus. So in this case, EXP bonus is at 1.0. If you set it to 2.0, an expiration as 300,000. So now, once you start the bonus, after 5 minutes it will expire, but during the bonus, players will gain double experience. Hats are just blocks that players can place on their head, like grass or cobblestone. Normally, you just want to leave this as false, but it is fun to enable. Under features here, you have item rule, so this is just whether or not players in a party will share items that are dropped from a mob. Scoreboard is just a scoreboard that appears on the side of your screen when you have heroes installed. You can adjust the attributes, the text, and whatnot in here, so that way it can look a bit cleaner or more to your server's formatting. Moving on to damages. This is just how much health and damage specific mobs will have, along with environmental damage, such as how much damage lava does. So this is 20% of your health. This is in a percentage. Let's say you want to do 40%. Lava will now do 40% damage. Same for the other items in this list, except for the top ones here, which are in flat damage. So poison does 0.5 damage, and fire ticks do 1 damage. You do have other attributes you can edit, such as the enchantment damage. So if you have thorns, how much extra damage that adds to your item, and then damage all. Fairly simple. So we're just going to exit out of here and go to experience. This is how much experience you gain for each item listed here. So in this case, if somebody farms crops and they have farming in their experience source on their class, profession, or race, they'll gain the experience to that specific class, profession, or race. Same with killing, mining. You can just edit this here per mob, per item. You can get real crazy and add different items. So let's say you wanted to add sand to the list. You can add sand, or sand's already on there, but you can add specific blocks. Permission skills are really fun, so you can add different permissions from different plugins. So let's say you want somebody to be able to use the permission compass from Essentials. You can just make a permission skill called compass, and then put essentials.compass, and we'll put use compass. So now if a person has the skill compass, they're going to be able to type /compass in chat and use the essentials.compass command. Recipes are specific recipes for classes, so if you put swords in the class's recipes option, they'll be able to craft these specific items. Fairly basic, you just put the item ID here, and it'll give them the option to craft those items. And the skills.yml, we've already been in earlier. This just shows you all the default options for every single skill and all the default text. You can edit this to your liking, so that way it applies to all classes that have the skills, and you can also edit it on a per class basis in the class file. Permissions are very simple. I'm going to assume that you know how to set up a permissions plugin, but all you want to do is go back to the Heroes plugin page and scroll on down over to, oh, this is still the wiki, scroll on down to the part that says permissions here, and you can add your specific permissions node. So heroes.classes.star will give players access to all classes of wildcard permissions true, and then class name, so let's say a class has wildcard permissions to false, you can give that specific player access to that class. It's good for giving premium rewards. Heroes.reset, generally you want to lock players out of this option because some players can accidentally reset themselves if they don't know what they're doing. And the other ones are fairly self-explanatory. You don't want to give the admin ones to default players and whatnot. So now that the plugin is configured to our liking, I'm going to hop in game and give you a basic overview of commands. The first thing a player is going to do when they join the server is check out your hero paths, because by default they're going to be whatever class you had set to default. So in this case, Rogue is my default class, Crafter is my default profession, and Elf is my default race. So I'm going to type hero paths, and it'll show them access to all the classes that they have access to. So if I want to choose Rogue, I would just click on Rogue, and then confirm, but this is already my class, so let's say I'll choose Mage. I would click on it, and then I'll click confirm. I'm just going to click cancel here because I want to stay Rogue for the sake of demonstration. After they confirm, the first thing they're going to do is probably check out the specs for the class. So in this case, Rogue has access to Assassin. They also might want to check out their profession. So in this case, my profession is Crafter. So let's say I wanted to change my profession. I'll type hero, prof, and then Crafter. It's already my class, but then it would give me the same confirm or cancel option, and I would be able to choose it as my class. Same thing of race. So hero, race, orc. Currently I'm an elf. It'll ask me if I want to be an orc, and now I'm an orc. So now I have all the benefits of being a rogue, being a crafter, and being an orc. After that, the player is going to want to check out what tools they have access to. So you're going to type hero tools. It's going to show that I have access to all of these tools here, and the amount of damage I do with each tool. In this case, I made Blaze Rod a god weapon, so Blaze Rod is going to deal 105 damage. And then they're going to check out the armor they have access to. So I gave Rogue access to leather and chainmail. So if I give myself chain helmet 1, I can now put on a chain helmet, and it's not going to kick it out of my inventory. Whereas a diamond helmet would be kicked off my head, just because I don't have access to use it. Alright, then they're going to check out their skills. So, as a level 1 rogue, I have access to backstab, mark, recall, and sneak. So I'm just going to give myself a diamond sword here, and you're going to type /bind, and then the name of the skill. So now when I right-click with the sword, it'll say I'm now sneaking, and my name tag will be hidden from other players while I can move around at full speed. Whereas normally you would have to be crouching, and that lowers your speed. So now we're going to move on to gaining experience. So I'm going to spawn 2 spiders here. I'm going to kill them, and that's going to level me up to level 2. If I were to level up more, so let's spawn a few more spiders here, hopefully not too many for me to handle. I would eventually level up to level 5. For the sake of this, I'm going to make my life easier and use admin commands. And now when I type /skills, I have access to level 5 skills I didn't have access to before, like mark and recall. But I still have access to higher level skills, such as level 10 skills, 15 and whatnot, so on and so on. The next thing you're going to gain is attributes. So every time a player levels up, they're just going to want to type /hero attributes, and they're going to gain more attribute points that they can assign to their different attributes, like strength, charisma, and whatnot. So as a rogue, maybe I want to deal more damage, so I'm just going to add all my attribute points to strength, and click confirm. So now my attribute points have been changed, and I'm going to do more damage with my diamond sword, along with the level up damage that I got, and the attribute damage that I got. Heroes also has a basic party system. This is really good for sharing experience, so I'm going to log on my buddy's account here, and run over to myself. So now if I just want to type /party, invite, luckier, he's going to get an invite, and he can click on a confirmation to join. So now, if I were to spawn some more spiders, because that worked out well last time. Oh, let me see if I could get the kill before it dies. So you'll see I gained experience, and he gained half experience because I got the kill. This does have a distance, so if I were to fly away and spawn some spiders and kill them, I will gain experience, but he won't, and I gain more experience because I'm not sharing party experience. To leave a party, you can just type /party leave, and you'll no longer be in the party. You can also kick somebody with party, kick, and then the name of the player. It won't do anything now because he's already left the party. So now we're going to get into admin commands. They're fairly basic. There's only a few. The ones I'm going to cover here are class, level, experience, and that's about it. So hero, admin, class, LkMMoDC, mage will force me into a different class. If I type rogue, it'll force me back to rogue, and I won't have the class cooldown. If I type hero, admin, level, LkMMoDC, which would be my username, rogue, and then 25, it's going to force me to be a level 25 rogue. You can also do experience, so hero, admin, exp, MMoDC, rogue, and 5,000. That granted me 5,000 experience and put me up to the level of that class. Hopefully that helped. If there's anything I didn't cover that you need more information on, you can always resort to the wiki on the Hero Spigot page, and then you have access to basically everything that you need access to. So that way you can learn about specific skills and how to configure the plugin to your liking. I couldn't cover everything in this video, otherwise it would be like 2 hours long. Hopefully what I did cover does help. Have a good one.